Hey everybody, and welcome back to my tutorial series on how to build a desktop application style multifunctional Discord bot in Python. So last time, well, first off, I want to thank you for sticking with me on this. I was definitely a little tired at the end of the last video and had to chop off quite a bit that I had worked on because I realized I had done stuff in the wrong order and it was just going to be too much work to go back and try and fix what I had messed up. So it was best just to stop the video where we stopped it, and we'll go over the rest of the profile details class in this video. So the first thing I'd like to do is make properties to expose all of our underlying attributes. But in order to do that, we're going to need to make a sentinel value. Similar to what we made here in the make embed function, where we just refer to the sentinel value that the library uses for embeds, we need to make one of our own so that we can check our data against that. So I'm going to make a class here, and we're going to call it underscore not set. Okay, it's typical class. And then I want to define a couple of internal methods, because these are going to be how we compare things and how we return data. So first I want to define the equals, and let's type this, any. And this is going to return us a Boolean, obviously. And so we're saying if A equals B, or in this case, if A equals not set, which it never should. So we're going to return false. This should never ever equal anything else. So let's define our Boolean. And this is going to return a Boolean. And let's return false. Pretty simple. And let's also define our string function, because this is going to allow us to pass this into f strings and use it to tell the user that they haven't set anything in their profile. So for this, I want to return the words not set, and I'm going to surround them with tick marks, because in Discord, that allows us to make something a code snippet. And using a code snippet for this is going to make it stand out to the user, and they won't mistake it as perhaps text that they had put in. Okay, so this is our Sentinel class, but every time we compare to this, I don't want to say if A is equal to not set, and then we have and then we have to instantiate it like that. That's a little bit messy. So what I want to do is I want to instantiate this class right here into a variable, and then we'll export the variable from this module. So we're going to say ns equals an instance of not set, just like that. And then if we come up here to our dunder all and just put ns, the variable here, now we already have an instantiated not set that we can reference. Okay, so a little bit cleaner, and that's the way we're going to do it. Okay, so over here in details, let's finally make these properties to expose the data that we've made here in our init. So let's type @property, and we're going to say def char name with no underscore this time and no parameters. It's going to return an optional string, and we're just going to return self.characterName, or in the event that the character name is none, we're going to return that sentinel value that we just created in our utilities folder. Okay, so you'll see the benefit of this later, but for now, just know that we need to return this empty value from all of our properties if they're empty values. Now we're going to need a way to set this, right? So right now this is the getter, and so we'll add a setter. So we're going to say at the property that we created dot setter, and now we define this same exact function, the same name, but this time it's going to take a value. And typically this value is going to need to be the data type that we're expecting, right? That would make sense. In the event of a character name, we always want to make sure that we have a character name. So within our logic later on, when we're getting this information, we're not going to allow the user to to remove their character name. So in this case, we're only ever going to set a string into this property. we'll never be setting a null value. So here I just want to say self.charactername with the underscore equals value. Okay, do be careful. I did this a lot by saying self.charactername and you refer back to the actual property itself. That's not fun. That's going to crash your code. So always make sure that if we're in the setter, we're returning the property, the value with the underscore. Great. Awesome. Swag, whatever the kids say these days. So let's go ahead and expose our URL. And this is going to return us an optional string because maybe the URL isn't set. And for the URL, we want to just return self.url, or in the event that self.url is none, we want to return the null sentinel value. Okay, let's make the setter at url.setter, and we're going to def URL. And again, this is going to take a value, and this value, okay, so later on, we do want to let the user delete their URL, right? Their character name is important. That always needs to be there. It can't just be profile for not set. That's not going to work. But let's say that the user's subscription to sexyfrogs.com ran out. Well, we don't want to force them to put a URL in there. We want to say, all right, that's fine. You can get rid of that, and we'll just revert it back to the default formatting. So here we do want to take an optional string. And of course, this won't return anything. And so we want to say self.url equals the value that we're passing in. Okay, again, later on, this is going to have update logic for our database, but since we aren't storing values right this second, it's going to be a pretty basic setter. Okay, so how about the color? Let's talk about that. This could return an optional color, right? Because that's the data type that we're expecting. And now I want to return self.color if there's a color in that variable. Uh-oh, wrong line. Self.color. Or we're going to do something different here. So instead of our sentinel value, I want to return embed.empty. Now, why do I want to do this? I want to be able to pass this property directly into our make embed function without any kind of processing, without any kind of logic between those two steps. So if we make our null value embed.empty for this, then we can literally just always say profile details.color and pass that in wherever we're at in the code. Okay, so there's going to be a little extra logic in the setter for this one. And we're going to say at color.setter def color. And then of course we're going to take a value. And for the value I want to pass a union of color and integer. So there are a number of ways that we could construct a color class. We may do that elsewhere in our code. We may use a class method, for instance, like color.red. Or when we're converting from the user's hexadecimal value that they input into the modal box, we're going to turn that into an integer. And when we turn it into an integer, all we want to do is be able to say details.color equals whatever the modal input's value is. We just want to be able to pass it like that. We'll deal with the conversion here in the setter, okay? So that's why we're passing a color and an integer here. So let's start by saying if we have a color, then we're just going to set self.color equals the value that we passed in. Because it's already a color, we're good to go. But what if it isn't? What if we've passed in an integer? Well, remember, we can't have none here because we always want to have a color. We always want to have that accent value. And honestly, if the user doesn't want to have it, they can put in a hex color for gray, if that makes sense. So we want to say self.color, which has always got to be an instance of the color class. That's what we're expecting. But the great thing is we can pass the raw 16-bit integer value into the color constructor, and it knows what's going on. So there we go. Let's make sure, however, that we import union up here. Okay, awesome. Oh, and this squiggly is because I mixed these up. This should be value and color. So the class that we're examining comes first, and the class that we're comparing to comes second. Okay. So what do we do now? Let's talk about our jobs. So at property, and we're going to say def jobs. And okay, so I want to return an optional string for this. Why are we returning a string? Well, the most common usage of our jobs property is going to be when compiling the profile. So the easiest thing to do is to return the value that we want to use in the final profile here, because that's going to be the most common calling of the function. So the way that I want to display jobs in the profile is I want to separate them with a slash. Okay, pretty straightforward. And we're going to join self.jobs. If self.jobs is not none. Oh, excuse me. If it exists, because self.jobs is always a list, so we can just simply say if self.jobs, because that calls the Boolean. Otherwise, we want to give us back the NS. Very good. So let's go at jobs.setter. This is going to be another basic setter. Self value. This could be an optional list of jobs, or excuse me, of strings. Getting a bit ahead of myself. Let's slow down. It's not going to return anything since it's a setter. And we're just going to say self.jobs equals value. Okay. So let's do the rates. This one's going to return an optional string. And then simply enough, return self.rates or NS. So the same general formula that we've been using. And then another basic setter for this. Rates.setter. F rates. We're going to get a value, which could be an optional string. Yep. And we're going to say self.rates equals value. All right. Very good. Okay. The last thing I want to do is create a property for the post URL. We're using the same formula as rates, so I'm just going to copy this down here. And we're going to say post URL underscore post URL. And change these as well. Okay. Simple enough, right? Excellent. So let's finally get on making the status function. Before we create the function in our details class, I want to go back to our profile section. And we're going to define the status function here first, because every single section in our profile is going to be able to display the status of its data to the user. The behavior is obviously going to be different between sections. However, we're always going to have this function. So we're just going to say def status. It's only going to take the self, and it's going to return to us an embed. Okay, and we're going to raise a not implemented error here. And this is, if we try to invoke this status function without defining any logic within the subclasses, we're going to get an exception, and Python is going to stop our bot, which we don't want, obviously. That is bad. So let's go back over here to our details, and if you look at the profile details class definition, it now has a yellow squiggly saying we're not implementing all the methods. Fantastic. That's the behavior we want, so let's define that method and get rid of the squiggly. So we're going to say def status, which I can auto-complete in here. Thank you, PyCharm. And the first thing that I want to address is the jobs list, okay? So what do we want this to look like? Well, let's go back over here into Discord and reference the embed we've got already. So instead of including the character name in the title, we're going to change this position line to be the character name. Since the position isn't going to be applicable to our bot, we don't need to worry about that. We're going to have some fields. We're going to have the color and other jobs fields, and these are going to be inline, so they make 2 columns. We're going to have a profile URL field, which will not be inline because that can get a little long. And then we're going to have our rates field on this as well. Okay? So I want to start with the other jobs, and if you look right here, it's a bulleted list, and we're using hyphens for the bullets. Okay? So that's going to be pretty straightforward behavior to make happen. So let's go in here. We're going to say jobs equals a hyphen and a space. And then we're going to say plus new line hyphen space dot join self dot jobs. But if self dot jobs is none, or self dot jobs is empty, excuse me, because it's always going to be a list. When we're constructing, we're either going to get a list of jobs, or we're going to add an empty list in here. So either way, it's going to be a list. So we can just say if self.jobs, because that calls the boolean of the list, and a boolean of a boolean of an empty list is false. Otherwise, we're going to say we want the string value of ns. So we want the string value of that sentinel class that we made in our utils file, which is going to be not set. Okay, so next thing we're going to look at is the accent color. But before we do that, if we come back over here into Discord, you'll notice that this field has an arrow in it. So this is our accent color field. And we're going to address this momentarily, but we have an arrow right here. And our bot is going to use a significant number of emojis. For instance, we've got some emojis here around the position. And in almost every other embed, we're going to be using emojis. So I want to make an easy way for us to define those, and so we don't have to type things like colon, arrow left into our code every time. That's going to be error prone, and that's messy, and it's going to slow us down. So in our project directory, let's create a new folder, and it's going to be called assets. And within assets, I want to create a new Python file called emojis. And the way we're going to handle our emojis is that we're going to make an enum for them. So from enum, I want to import enum with a capital E. So lowercase enum is the module, uppercase is the class. And also from Discord, I want to import partial emoji, because that's the way that we're going to convert a string value into an emoji that the library can communicate to Discord. Okay? So let's put a horizontal rule in here and define our emoji class. So we're going to say class bot emojis is an enum. And the first one I want to put is arrow left. And that's going to be equal to partial emoji. And we're not going to use a standard constructor for this. We're going to say dot from string, and we're going to pass in the string value of the emoji that we want to do. Now you could absolutely say arrow left, and I encourage that if that's the way that you like to type your emojis. I like to go the easy route, and on Windows there's a most wonderful shortcut that I'm excited to share with you. Windows key period brings up an emoji picker. Oh goodness, I cannot tell you how frequently I use this in my Discord travels. So we're just going to select the emoji that we want, and we're going to put it in here. Again, we need to use from string though. Okay, so that's our emoji. Our emoji holding class. We can just close out of that for now. So let's address the color. Let's say that our accent color attribute that we set here in the class is not none. So if self.color is not none, then we want to go ahead and use the value within the attribute to set the accent color of the embed here on the left, and the hex value of the color in this field. So we're setting two things based on one attribute of the class. And clear that. Okay, so back here in our code, let's make sure we import the bot emojis class that we created just a second ago. And just to make this easier, since we're going to have a few classes like emojis up here in assets, I want to create a dunder init file. So that we're going to make this a package, and it's just going to be a little cleaner to import things from. Let me just grab this. And so we're going to say from .emojis import bot emojis, because we've only defined one class. We're only ever going to define one class in the emojis file. So I'm just going to explicitly say what class we want to import into our init file. Okay, so back here in the details file, we're going to say from assets import bot emojis. Great, following along? Good, good, good. So let's say down here, if our self.color is not none, color field equals an f string of bot emojis dot arrow left, and we're going to say hyphen hyphen. Because remember, look back here in Discord, we've got the arrow and then a hyphen, and then it's going to tell us what our accent color value is. So you can see it's in parentheses and it's underlined. So let's keep that formatting. We're going to make parentheses, and then surrounding something on both sides by 2 underscores is going to underline it. And then right here, I'm going to say string self.color. And you may be asking yourself, why are we passing the string? We're in an f string. Well, in order to use the .upper method, we have to convert it to a string first. And we can't use, we wouldn't be able to say .upper on the outside of the curly braces here in our f string, right? That would just make it part of the text. So we need to say it here. But if we don't call the string constructor and pass in self.color, it's going to be trying to apply the upper method to the color class that we have here. So that's why we need to put this inside the string converter first before calling upper. So that's going to result in this behavior down here. So the other thing I want to set is the accent, okay? And if our color is not none, we can just set accent equal to self.color. And notice this is important. We're setting these equal to the value of our color property, not the raw data in our class. We're setting it to the property, because remember, we've set in certain behaviors in our properties. For instance, with the color property, we've set that to return embed.empty if it's none, okay? So we might have none for the color attribute within the class, but if that's the case, then we're already doing the logic right here to return embed.empty, which is what we want in the status message, so it doesn't display weird. Okay, so if self.color is none, which is our else, the color field is going to be equal to the string value of not set. And if you remember, in our utils, we made the string value not set with ticks around it so that it appears different from the rest of the values. And then our accent color is just going to be embed.empty. Okay? Or actually, we're already saying embed.empty, so we can just say self.color. In fact, we don't even need to define accent color in here. We can pass self.color into the embed constructor. It's a little bit late. Can you tell I make these videos at night? Okay, so the last thing that we're going to do is we're going to define our fields. And this is going to be equal to a list. So back here in our make embed function, this is just to show you, we set the fields equal to a list of either tuples or embed fields. I prefer to make up the embed field directly, but some people prefer to just put in a tuple. It's easier on the eyes. Whatever works for you. So I'm going to quickly import embed field. Oh, I already have embed field imported. Excellent. Make sure you import embed field. And then we're going to create one here. And our first field, if we look back in Discord, is going to be the color. Because up here, everything in this section is the description. And we'll define that in the make embed function itself. But I want to define the fields right now. So this is our color field. So the name of the field is going to be _color. Because again, that underlines things, and we're making each of these headers underlined to make it stand out. And then we're going to say color field is the value, and then we do want it inline, so we'll pass true for the inline value. Next field that we want is our jobs. And we're going to set that equal to jobs because we've already done the logic to combine everything here, and we want that inline as well. Now the other two fields aren't going to be inline, and we can just use their raw values. So, whoops. Embed field, oh goodness. And we're going to put the custom URL here. And the great thing about this, again, with the property here, it's returning us NS. And the value of embed field is automatically cast to a string for us. So if we pass in the NS sentinel value, having defined the string property, we can it's automatically going to cast that to the format and the value that we want. So we can just say self.url, the property, not the underlying attribute. And this is not going to be inline. And the last field we're going to create is rates. Hopefully I'm not over-explaining things. I just like to elaborate on stuff that I found a little bit complicated or kind of weird to understand during my learning process. So please bear with me if it's a little bit over-explained. And the last thing we're going to do for our rates is we're going to say self.rates, the property, and this is not going to be inline. Okay, so remember that this returns an embedded message, and of course we made a handy function to do that. So I just want to return that function itself. There's no point in making an intermediary variable if we're just going to say make embed equals make embed and then return the embed. We can just return the actual product of the function itself. So for the title of the function, for the title of the embed, excuse me, I want to say profile details. And then we also want to set the color equal to the self.color, because remember, it could be an empty embed or it could be a color. Either way, our make embed function knows how to handle it. And then I want to set the description. So this is the one that we haven't defined up till this point, and if you've been paying attention to what the data points are in this class, then you'll know that the one thing we haven't done is put our character name somewhere. So this is the format that I want to use. I want to have a separator. I'm going to have character name followed by the character name of the user's character and another separator. But drawing separators, drawing every single one, measuring it out, and just tweaking it so it's perfect is going to be a lot of work. That's a lot of guess and test. So as you might have guessed from the build up here, we're going to make a function that does that for us. Awesome. So before we add the description here, we're just going to leave that blank for now. And down here in utils, underneath our make embed, let's make a new little section, and we're going to define draw separator. So this is going to have some logic in it, and I want you to understand where that logic came from first. So if I pull up my main Discord account here, and we look in our secret hidden category, you can see that the incredibly archaic way that I've measured out values in Discord for each text element is I've taken our separator value, so one of these, and I've compared it against 10 of the particular symbol or character or letter or number that we're looking at. And then I've taken how many of the separator values that we needed, and I've divided those. So this may seem a little silly. However, it was extremely effective, and I'm just going to give it to you so you don't have to do it yourself. So back in the code, before we look at the exact values of what each character is going to equal to, let's set up all the surrounding information. So we're going to make all of our arguments keyword arguments. We want to know exactly what each argument means when we pass it in. So the first thing we're going to pass is a text. Okay, this is going to be a string, and I want to just set it equal to an empty string. So in the event that our string has no actual text that we're defining, we can still make a separator with emojis, or just by defining the actual length that we want. So speaking of emojis, let's plan for those. So we're going to say number of emoji, and that's going to be an integer value, but by default we're not going to have any emoji in our strings. However, if we look back here at Discord, perhaps we'll end up with a situation like this, where we have emojis on either side of a job title. So for instance, right here, we've got emojis on either side of this. So we want to have a way to plan for that in our code, which is why we have a number of emojis parameter here. But let's say that our logic is just a hair off. Let's say that we want to add an extra amount to the separator. So for instance, here in Discord, and keep in mind, since I wrote the code for the bot originally, Discord changed their font, so this doesn't quite match up. But let's say this is what happened when you ran this draw separator on this string here. Ooh, we just need one more. It just needs one more. But the formula we made is not coming up with that one more. Well, that's what we want to use the extra for. So I'm going to make that a float, and I'm going to set it equal to 0.0. So this is going to return us a string of separator values. And to start out, I want to say the text value is equal to our extra that we passed in. So the text value is ultimately going to be a float, and it's equal to the extra characters that we need plus 1.95 times the number of emoji. So 1.95 is how many separator characters we need to equal the size of a standard emoji in Discord. Okay, so this line hopefully makes sense. Now, you can see our text is grayed out, and you're probably wondering, well, oh my goodness, what are we going to do for the text? What I want to do is I want to say for C in text, so we're going to loop through every character that we pass in this string, and I'm just going to pass the values. I'm just going to copy and paste these guys right into here, and I'm going to talk for a little bit and give you a chance to copy this down, pause the video, do what you need to do. But what I've done is I've, as you remember, measured out every single common character on the keyboard and seen exactly how many separator characters that character is equal to. So like an asterisk, for instance, very, very small. The @ sign, total fatty. So definitely take a second, pause the video, copy this down. Hopefully I'm not flipping through too quickly for you. And then the last thing we're going to do is we want to return a string, right? We want to return that separator that we've created. So I want to return, and I wanted to put in empty quotes for now because we're going to go grab our separator character in a minute, but I just want to finish off this function. And we're going to say separator character times math.ceiling, and we're going to put in the text value here. So that text value that we've generated by combining floats that represent the size of each character in our text string is now being rounded up, and we're going to multiply that value times the number of separators that we want, and it's going to return a string of separators. Pretty swag, right? Okay, so let's go grab that character. We're going to head out onto the magic of the internet for this. So prepare your eyes. We've got the white background of Wikipedia coming up. And all I did was Google Unicode characters, and the Wikipedia page for the list of Unicode characters was the first thing that came up. And what we're looking for is going to be under box drawing. Okay, so this is the box drawing category. These are really handy in Discord, by the way. If you're creating a server and you want to decorate your channel names, the box drawing characters are by far the ones that I use the most frequently, specifically because of these down here. These look really nice in channel names. I know that's not necessarily the point of the tutorial. However, I just wanted to let you know because some people don't realize that. So the character we're looking for is this right here. It looks like an equal sign. And if we mouse over it, it is U2550. It's a double horizontal. Okay, so it's in the U255X line, and it's under the 0. So right here, grab that, and let's erase that. We can close this, and we'll paste our separator character into the quotes right there. Okay? Awesome. So this is our function to draw a separator based on text, emojis, and any extra that we need. And the great part about the extra is we don't even have to pass in text here. We can draw a separator of 30 characters and use that as a constant sized separator. And we're going to be doing that in between sections. But for now, I want to go up here to our all, and I want to export draw separator, just like that. Okay, so we're done in our utils for now. Let's head back into details. So for our description, let's go ahead and make an F string. And we're going to say in here, draw separator. And for the text value of our draw separator, because remember we used an asterisk, so all of the parameters and arguments need to be keyword, we're going to pass the string value of our self.character name. And remember to use the property, not the underlying attribute, because this property may return us not set. And we do want to draw a separator based on the actual words not set. So if that's the case, we don't want to draw it based on the word none, which is what we would get in if we passed none into a string converter. Excuse me, getting a little ahead of my own brain here. Let's add a new line here. And then here in this one, we're going to say the string value of self.character name. So this is what we're passing to the draw separator function, and it's going to draw the separator around this. And again, we're passing this, even though it's an F string, we're passing in the string value of self.character name to turn it into not set with the little backticks, just to make sure that it converts properly. Let's copy this draw separator line because we want an identical one right down here. Oh, excuse me, and let's put a new line at the end of the second line there. And really quickly, I didn't explain this, and I apologize. You may be wondering why I'm constructing my description this way, between parentheses. So in Python, if you include strings between parentheses and do not put commas after each line, that's going to concatenate those strings for you. And I find that that's an extremely useful way of seeing your formatting in your code. And then down here, I want to type in select a button to add/edit the corresponding profile attribute. Just to kind of give some direction to the user. Because remember, users are not always smart, and what's intuitive to us is not necessarily intuitive to them. So we want to make sure we're very explicit with what they should be doing. Okay, so the last thing I want to pass is the fields, and we're just going to set that equal to fields, just like that. Okay, so we now have a status function that's going to return an embed with our data on it. So let's call this. Let's finally test. Oh my goodness, so much internal work. Let's finally get some testing. So we'll head back over to our testing cog for now. And from classes.profiles, from the profiles package, I want to also import profile details like I have right here. So down here in our testing command, remember the profile details constructor. Even if we're doing this for demonstration purposes, we need to pass in a parent profile. That's important. So in our testing cog, I'm just going to make a profile that is of class profile. It doesn't need anything right now. It doesn't need any ID, any guild, any user. And then I'm going to say details equals profile details and input the profile as the parent. And I want to respond to the CTX. And we're going to say the embed is just directly equal to details.status. Okay, so let's boot up our bot and make sure everything is still working. Oh, and I made a mistake. One moment. I was testing out our emojis earlier, and we need to change our configuration back to the main file. So if that ever happens to you, if you're testing out a file and you for instance right click on it and you say run profile, that's going to change our interpreter configuration up here. So we always want to be on main when we're testing our bot. Okay, that's much better. We're good to go. We're online. Let's run our testing command. And it looks like we have an error. Let's see what the problem is. Object type not set as Sarah. Oh dear. Okay, so I've located the issue. I made a silly mistake. The values in our embed field are not necessarily cast to a string for us. So what's happening right here is since we haven't set our URL and our self.rates, these are passing in the NS Sentinel value to our embed field. So we actually need to surround these in a string converter in order to pass in the actual words not set. So that was my fault. I gave you wrong information. These values are not implicitly converted to a string. So we always need to specify if it's going to be something that's an unusual class, so it's not a string, it's not an int, it's nothing that Python is used to, a native type, we need to use a string converter. Okay, let's try this one more time. All right, we're up and running, very good, and let's run our testing command. There we go, much better. So as you can see right here, we have a little bit extra, and the reason for that is that, remember, not set is actually surrounded by 2 tick marks. So it's represented this way. So our draw separator function is seeing these tick marks even though Discord doesn't render them because they're a code snippet. So that's okay. It's a very, very small amount, and it doesn't look too bad, so I'm not going to worry about that. Plus, the goal is to have the user fill this out with their actual character name, which shouldn't have ticks in it. So this should be a non-issue, and I'm okay with it. Otherwise, as you can see, we have our color and our jobs fields here, both in one row, so they're in line. And then our custom URL, which again could get kind of long, so we made that not in line. And our rates field, which is also not inline, because that could also be a little bit longer depending on the type of job our character does. Okay, so we have our status, and I think I'm going to end the video here for now. It's getting a little bit long, but in our next videos, in our next video, singular, we're going to take a look at adding buttons to this, and we're going to see how we can interact with the details message and keep updating it while we're inputting information. So again, we don't want to have multiple messages being spammed into the channel. We're going to edit this as we go. So I appreciate you watching, and we'll see you next time.